Chapter 13. Toad's Adventures. Meanwhile, Toad found himself in a dank dungeon. He flung himself at full length on the floor and abandoned himself to dark despair. "This is the end of everything," he said. "At least it is the end of Toad, which is the same thing." With cries such as these, he passed his days and nights, refusing his meals. Now the jailer had a daughter who was particularly fond of animals. One day she knocked at the door on Toad's cell. "Cheer up, Toad," she said on entering, "and sit up and dry your eyes and be a sensible animal, and do try to eat a bit of dinner. See, I've brought you some of mine, hot from the oven." The smell of cabbage reached the nose of Toad, but he refused to be comforted. The wise girl left for the time, but a good deal of the cabbage smell remained. When the girl returned some hours later, she carried a tray with a cup of hot steaming tea on it, and a plate piled high with buttered toast, the butter running off in great drops like honey from the honeycomb. Toad sat up, dried his eyes, and sipped his tea. He munched his toast, and soon began talking about himself. "Tell me about Toad Hall," the girl said, "but first wait till I fetch some more tea and toast." She soon returned with a fresh tray. Toad, his spirits quite restored, told her all about his house and the fun he had when the other animals were gathered around. She wanted to know about his animal friends and how they lived and what they did. Of course, she did not say she was fond of animals as pets, because she had the sense to see that Toad would be extremely offended. They had many interesting talks together after that as the dreary days went on. The jailer's daughter grew very sorry for Toad, and thought it was a great shame that a poor little animal should be locked up in prison for what seemed like a trivial offense. "Toad," she said one morning, "I have an aunt who does the washing for all of the prisoners here. She takes the washing out on Monday morning and brings it in on Friday morning. Today is Thursday. Now I believe I could dress you up in her dress and bonnet, and you could escape from the jail. You're alike in many respects, particularly about the figure." "We're not," said the Toad in a huff. "I have a very elegant figure for what I am." "So has my aunt," replied the girl, "for what she is. But have it your own way, you horrid, proud, ungrateful animal, when I'm trying to help you." "Yes, yes," said the Toad, "but look here. You couldn't possibly have Mr. Toad of Toad Hall going about dressed as a washerwoman." "Then you can stay here as Toad," replied the girl with much spirit. "You are a good, kind, clever girl," Toad said, "and I am indeed a proud and stupid Toad. Introduce me to your worthy aunt, if you will be so kind." The next evening the girl ushered her aunt into Toad's cell. The old lady had been prepared for the meeting, and the sight of the gold coins that Toad had placed on the table left little further to discuss. In return for his cash, Toad received a cotton print gown, an apron, a shawl, and a black bonnet. Shaking with laughter, the girl fit him into the gown, arranged the shawl, and tied the strings of the bonnet under his chin. "You look just like her," she giggled. "Only I'm sure you never looked so respectable in all your life before. Now goodbye, Toad, and good luck." With a quaking heart, Toad set forth on what seemed to be a most hazardous trip, but he was soon surprised at how easy everything was. The costume seemed a key for every locked door and grim gateway. At last he heard the gate in the great outer door click behind him, felt the fresh air of the outer world upon his brow, and knew that he was free. He walked quickly towards the lights of the town. As he ambled along, his attention was caught by some red and green lights a little way off to one side of town. he heard the sound of train engines puffing and snorting. Aha, he thought, this is a piece of luck. A railway station is the thing I want most in the whole world at this moment. He made his way to the station and found that a train, bound more or less in the direction of his home, was due to leave in half an hour. More luck, said Toad, his spirits rising rapidly, and went off to buy his ticket. He gave the name of that station he knew to be nearest to Toad Hall and put his fingers where his waistcoat pocket should have been in search of the money for the ticket. But then he realized that he had not only no money, but no pocket to hold it, and no waistcoat to hold the pocket. To his horror, he remembered that he had left both his coat and waistcoat behind him in his cell, and with them his money, keys, and watch, all that makes life worth living. Full of despair, he wandered blindly down the platform where the train was standing, and tears trickled down each side of his nose. Very soon his escape would be discovered, and he would be caught and dragged back to prison. What was to be done? "Hello, mother," said the engine driver. "What's the trouble? You don't look particularly cheerful." "Oh, sir," said Toad, crying, "I am a poor, unhappy washerwoman, and I've lost all my money and can't pay for a ticket, and I must get home tonight somehow. Oh dear, oh dear." "That's a bad business indeed," said the engine driver. "Lost your money and can't get home, and got some kids too waiting for you, I dare say." "Any amount of 'em," sobbed Toad, "and they'll be hungry and playing with matches and upsetting lamps, the little ones. Oh dear, oh dear." "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do," said the good engine driver. "You're a washerwoman, very well, and I'm an engine driver, as you may well see, and there's no denying it's terribly dirty work. If you'll wash a few shirts for me when you get home and send 'em along, I'll give you a ride on my engine." The Toad's misery turned into joy as he eagerly scrambled up into the cab of the engine. Of course he had never washed a shirt in his life, but he thought, when I get safely home to Toad Hall, I will send the engine driver enough to pay for a lot of washing, and that will be the same thing, or better. The guard waved his welcome flag, the engine driver whistled in cheerful response, and the train moved out of the station. As the speed increased, and Toad could see on either side of him real fields, and trees, and hedges, and cows, and horses all flying past him, he thought how every minute was bringing him nearer to Toad Hall. He began to skip up and down and shout and sing, to the great astonishment of the engine driver, who had come across washerwomen before, but never one at all like this. They had covered many a mile when Toad noticed that the engine driver, with a puzzled expression on his face, was leaning over the side of the engine and listening hard. "It's very strange. We're the last train running in this direction tonight, yet I hear another following us." Toad stopped his silly antics at once. He became serious and depressed, and a dull pain in the lower part of his spine made him want to sit down and try desperately not to think of all the possibilities. Presently, the engine driver called out, "I can see it clearly now. It's an engine on our rails. They are gaining on us fast, and the engine is crowded with policemen in their helmets, waving clubs, detectives waving revolvers and walking sticks, all waving and all shouting the same thing. Stop! Stop! Stop!" The Toad fell on his knees among the coals, raised his clasped paws, and cried, "Save me! Only save me, dear, kind Mr. Engine Driver. I am not the simple washerwoman I seem to be. I am a Toad, the well-known and popular Mr. Toad. I have just escaped, by my great daring and cleverness, from a loathsome dungeon, and if those fellows on that engine recapture me, it will be chains and bread and water and straw and misery once more for poor, innocent Toad." The engine driver looked down at him sternly and said, "Now tell the truth. What were you in prison for?" It was nothing much, said poor Toad. I only borrowed a motor car while the owners were at lunch. I didn't mean to steal it, really, but people take such harsh views of my high-spirited actions. The engine driver looked very severe. I fear that you have been a wicked Toad, but the sight of an animal in tears makes me feel soft-hearted. So cheer up, Toad. We may beat them yet. They piled on more coal, shoveling furiously. The furnace roared, the sparks flew, but still their pursuers slowly gained. The engine driver, with a sigh, wiped his brow. There's one thing left, and it's your only chance. A short way ahead of us is a long tunnel, and on the other side the line rail passes through the thick wood. Now, when we are through, I will pull on the brakes as hard as I can, and you must jump and hide in the wood before they get through the tunnel and see you. Then I will go full speed again, and they can chase me if they like. The train shot into the tunnel and out the other end into the fresh air and the peaceful moonlight. The driver shut off steam and put on brakes. As the train slowed down, Toad heard the driver call out, "Now jump!" Toad jumped, rolled down a short hill, picked himself up unhurt, scrambled into the wood, and hid. Peeping out, he saw his train get up speed again and disappear at great pace. Then out of the tunnel burst the train of police, roaring and whistling, the crew shouting, "Stop! Stop!" He did not dare leave the shelter of the trees, so he fled into the wood with the idea of leaving the railway as far as possible behind. After being in jail, he found the wood strange and unfriendly. At last, cold, hungry, and tired out, he found shelter in a hollow tree, where he made himself as comfortable a bed as he could and slept soundly till the morning.